Hi, my name is Angela O'Neill, and welcome to Stories in Progress. Stories are told in so many ways, through a book, a song, a play, a painting on a canvas, or a coffee with friends. So this is a place for stories to be told, stories from the past, and stories that are still in progress. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Stories in Progress. All right, you may be wondering if you're watching, because you can watch on YouTube, you may be wondering, Angela, it's just you. And you are correct. Today's episode is just going to be me. I know, I'm sorry, there's not a cool other person that is here to talk, but I am excited to share a little bit with you about the storytelling process. We're going to dive into one of the chapters in Unspoken Word, One Moment with Jesus Changes Everything. Hopefully we have a really good time, even though I am flying solo today. So I got my cup of coffee, which if you know me, you know that I have a cup of coffee with me pretty often in life, but the cup I'm holding in specific, this was very intentional. There's this really cute bird. It's like this handmade ceramics cup that I remember getting when John and I were on a work trip of his in Colorado when he worked for Concordia University. And at the time, yes, there's a point, I promise, stay with me. At the time, he was working for a program that was with Dr. John Townsend, the great, wonderful counselor. If you've read his book, Boundaries, anyways, John was working with him. They were at a conference, and I went to go work at a coffee shop to write because I was going to be personally performing a spoken word for the first time. And I was going to be doing my story in spoken word form. And in fact, this is all part of the chapter we're going to talk about today, was that experience. And I was nervous and excited. And this cup is from that coffee shop. And here's some things. I can remember Dr. John Townsend and John, my husband, two Johns, dropping me off at the coffee shop. It was a cute coffee shop. I am all about creative vibes, and coffee shops that are cute and usually have like chandeliers and all those things. That is my creative space that I love. And I remember them dropping me off, and I had been sharing the concept and what was going to happen. And it was so neat to have, yes, my husband as a cheerleader, but to also have Dr. Townsend as a cheerleader. And I remember as they drove away, Dr. Townsend rolled down his window and started singing, "This is my story, this is my song." And maybe it didn't sound like me because I am a soprano musical theater voice. But anyways, it sticks with me, that person in your corner. And so this coffee cup is from that day. I actually just started using it. It was kind of like you might not be seeing the coffee cup, so I'll have to post a picture if you're listening on Spotify. But I thought I would share just some of the details. Also, in the same note with the same person, and this is just that encouragement from others that I think is so important. That's why community is important. Not that we're just encouraged, but also that we're held accountable, and there's people there in our corner helping us along the way in our walks. But I remember I was going to be speaking at an event, and I think as an artist or someone who approaches things from a creative perspective, it sometimes, and I remember this being a little more present then, there's that, do I dive into who I am? And because what I do might sound different than what is out there, or do I conform to sound like everyone else? And I remember Dr. Townsend saying to me, Angela, you've got to be you. You've got to do, so basically like be creative and add the creative side. You have to do you. And honestly, if I'm that has meant so much. And little did I know at that time how much of an impact, because I think at the time I was like, okay, cool, but I'm not so sure because it's different. And what if people don't like that or get it, or what if all the what ifs? But that has settled in my heart, and in this process has been so instrumental. I don't know that I was like thinking that every day, but for sure those words of you do who God called you to be. And that's what you need to do. Do what God called you to do, and your voice will sound different, and that's okay. And so I hope that this gives encouragement in the sense of, isn't it great that God has created us all differently? God, the master artist, has created all of us differently. And if we all sounded the same, that would be one, boring and probably not work out so well. And so how beautiful that he is an artist and that we are created differently with our own DNA. And so those words have meant a lot, because there are times when I approach whether it be a speaking situation or whatever. I think of it less now, but those words matter for sure, to remember that it is okay to step into who God has called me to be. And so there's that. And so today, while I drink this cup of coffee and wear my sweatshirt from the Well Coffee House, one of my new favorite coffee houses, we are going to talk about the Samaritan woman at the well. Yes, all goes together. And this is, I say this all the time, this is one of my favorite stories in scripture. But I truly do love this story so much. This is chapter 3 of my book. And the reason that you just got me today is this is the story that when I've spoken at places, and they ask like, what talks have you done? This is the one that gets asked for the most, and it's your story for God's glory. Key differentiating words there. Your story for God's glory. And so I just wanted to share a little bit. This is just one of those stories in scripture. Gosh, like it's so, they're all rich. What am I saying? Never mind. This story has a lot to unpack. We'll say that. Christ's intentionality, barriers being broken culturally, social barriers, personal barriers, all of those things being broken in a beautiful way, walls coming down because of Jesus. And so I just wanted to share a little bit and hopefully encourage you that your story matters, because your story for God's glory could be just the story that someone needs to remind them or help them forward in their faith, or help them realize that the God of the Bible is the same today. He's the same God because he never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so let's just talk a little bit about the story, and then I'm going to read the whole spoken word. And so the woman at the well, the chapter is entitled The Outcast in the book. And that's who she was. She was an outcasted woman. We see that through the setting. We see that as her story starts to be uncovered. So in this story, this woman is going to the well at noon, at the heat of the day, which culturally at the time, the woman would go early in the morning. Why would you go early in the morning? Because it's not as hot. You think about like honestly carrying a water jug. First off, like water, this is a necessity for life. This isn't a luxury. We need to drink water. But you would have to go get the water. It's not like turning on the faucet. And so the jug would be enough for the day. And the women would go making sense before it got hot. Also, you go in numbers because of safety, right? There's all these things, but this lady, this woman, Samaritan woman, is going at noon, which would probably mean she was more alone, less safety in numbers. And we'll learn her story a little bit along the way and realize that it appears, is an outcasted woman in society. And so you think about, like, was she not invited to the water party with the other woman? We women like to do things together. We have potty parties. I mean, we got to go like together. We like to be together. We go get our nails done together. We like to sit and have coffee with each other. I just sat and had coffee with a friend today. If I were doing a mundane chore, I would want to do it with someone. This is me, because of that community. Let's make it less mundane. But she is alone. So there's that part. We're going to see the personal barriers come down. Jesus also, he and the disciples go through Samaria. This is just some of the background. Go through Samaria in this story, which culturally wasn't the case. There is a big family rift between the Jewish people and the Samaritans, who were partially Jewish descent. So there's like this family rift there that dates back hundreds and hundreds of years. My goodness, family rifts can have generational effects. And so, so much so that the Jewish people would usually, and remember, we're in the days of no cars, no Spotify playlist, none of that to make this trip easier. You're walking, and if you're lucky, you're on a donkey. So they would walk around Samaria to avoid the family conflict. That's the Reader's Digest version of it. Jesus says we're going through Samaria. So right there, he's like, I am breaking down barriers. And while he's there and the disciples go to get food, he encounters this Samaritan woman at the well alone, and he talks with her. And what a beautiful thing that is. This woman who appearingly is outcasted from society. This Jewish man is now sitting and talking with her. In fact, she questions him on this. And in the process, Jesus asks her questions, which in Jesus's questions, when someone asks you a question, what's happening? They're looking for a response. It's not just telling you something. So when Jesus asks questions, this is a conversation. Jesus is relational, which is so beautiful. So he asks her questions, and eventually it comes down to him telling her all the things she had ever done, which we find out that she had 5 husbands, and the man she was living with now was not her husband. And I can remember just reading this story and thinking, oh, like making my own assumption of who she was and why she was outcasted. Which there could have, in learning, there could have been so many factors in there that go beyond assumption. We don't know, but what we do know is that Jesus had this intentional meeting with this woman, and it was life-changing. And she instantly went and told her story to the very same people that would have been the gossips about her, would have considered her an outcast. She boldly tells her story to those same people. And what happens? Revival. People come to know Jesus. So, gosh, there's so many things to say. And so I'm going to read her spoken word right now. And then I'm going to share with you a little bit about that first time that I read this, that I presented the spoken word when I was speaking at a women's retreat at a church that I love these ladies and got to do a few retreats with them. And so I just want to read a little bit. So here we go. The woman at the well. This road, I know it well. Every day I take my path to the well. Day by day, I journey at the time in the day when no other makes their way. It's an isolated pathway. It's better that way. Yes, I've heard all the names. I've seen the looks of shame every time, every line, every raised eye, and all I wanted to do was get by, avoid the eyes, shy away from it all, forget the names I've been called. Yes, I've heard them all. No one cared to get to know me. Because they think they know the whole story, filling in the blanks of my story without knowing me fully. Never mind that we each have a story, pages of history, words that create lines, words that begin to define us as line by line the words intertwine, and over time, shame had become the word that defined every one of my lines. So, alone I walk. It's easier that way. Till the day all that changed. Until the day I saw him face to face. I can't explain it. What I saw was grace in that place where I used to feel disgraced. Something new was about to take place. As I walked to the well, I noticed a difference. Why is this Jewish man in this place? Does he not know that I am a disgrace, an outcast, let alone the issue of race? I'm a Samaritan. And to add to that, a Samaritan woman. Why was he even willing to share this space? So I approached timidly. Perhaps if I move quickly, he won't notice me, but then suddenly, unexpectedly, he spoke to me. Why is he asking for water from me? Does he know who I am? How do I ask this? How do you ask this of me, a Samaritan woman? But to my amazement, to my surprise, I did not see judgment in his eyes. He continued. He went on to say, if you knew who talked to you today, you'd say, give me living water. You'd never thirst another day, and it would be given to you today. So I say, give me this water, so I'll never be thirsty. So alone at this well, you will never again see me. Could I dare to allow hope in me? Allow my walls down for some stranger to see? Obviously, this was too good to be. As he continued, all good things must come to an end. With the following words, I knew I could not pretend. He said, go, grab your husband. Dread. It filled my cheeks, making them red. Once he hears about me, this offer will flee. I will remain thirsty. I have no husband. But he knew there was more to the story. He knew without any words from me. How could he know this? I don't understand. As he said, and the man you live with is not your husband. He went on to say all the things I had done. Who is this man? Is he a prophet that has come? Yet for some reason, the beat began to change. He knew all my sins. Yet this was different. He did not rub them in, use them against me. It's as though he wanted more for me, like the moment was supposed to be. Could it be? He came here to the well just for me? I've heard of Messiah. He said, I am he. No. Could it be? But at that moment I knew my eyes were beholding the King. My heart began to sing, but why would he, the Messiah, talk to me? Yet, looking in his eyes, the questions began to flee. Something began to take over me. A peace, a calm, a joy I'd never felt. Let me savor this moment forever. Let me feel what I felt. It's like nothing I can explain. His eyes made me forget the shame. So I ran. I ran to the city, leaving my water jar, leaving everything with me behind. You see, in his eyes, I felt the fear subside as I cried, come and see. A man who told me everything I did. Could this be Messiah? And the people began to come. That day will forever be the beginning of my new story. The Messiah, Jesus, changed my life for me, made a new creation out of me, set me free. So as you look at me, what you see is a woman who represents a life changed by him. Impossible became possible, not because of me, but because of him. And that's the spoken word monologue of the woman at the well. And first off, this was part of the beginnings of what I didn't know would be a book. I was simply writing spoken word monologues from the perspectives of people that I was reading about in the Bible. It was my beautiful personal time with Jesus. This was during COVID when we all were in lockdown and we had like all this time in the world. And this was part of how I used that time. Little did I know that a few years later it would become a book. And before that, this monologue was used at that women's retreat that I was talking about. And I remember pacing, and before this talk, while everyone was on their free time, I was pacing and just making sure the wording was right and that that it was memorized fully. And then I got up there to speak and started with this monologue. And it was one of those, like, I'm either going all in, like, how do I go? Can I go halfway in? Should I introduce it? Would that be more comfortable? And for this one, it started with the monologue, which the interesting part was like, will they come with me? Will they know what's happening? Will they think this is my story? And so in there, her story has a lot of things in it. She's had 5 husbands and the man she's with now is not her husband. Will they realize that I'm like playing a character right now? And these are all the things. But I decided I'm going to go in fully, and then we can talk about it after. And so I did. And I can remember that moment it got to the line where she was asking, and she says, I've heard of Messiah. And in scripture, Jesus says, I am he. And then in the monologue, she goes on to say, my eyes were beholding the king. Like, could it be the Messiah? And I remember in that moment, my eyes just welling with tears, imagining that moment from her eyes, imagining the revelation of the Messiah. And it was so emotional. It was so real and raw to step into her shoes and have that moment. And I will never forget that. And then you go in and you uncover more and more. And as we realize later, she is one of the first people where verbatim it is verbally announced that Jesus is Messiah. He reveals, I am he. One of the first. And then we see it's this outcasted woman. It's this woman that other people were avoiding this place altogether. So much there that Jesus comes for all of us. He doesn't come for some of us. He doesn't come for a few. He came for all of us. And this book, writing this book has just uncovered the intentionality and beauty of Jesus and the message that he came for us all. And here's the instantaneous life change. What does she do? Her response is she leaves what she came there for. And remember, this is a necessity. She's going to need to drink water. She leaves her water jug, whatever she worked for in that to get there, whatever physical exertion that was, she left her water jug and ran to that city. The same people that most likely know her story, but approached it in a way, I'm sure, of more gossip. I mean, we don't see that, but we can assume that she is not, that she's the talk of the town in a different way, not in a good way. We can deductive reasoning go there with just the time of the day that she's there, trying to be alone, and her story. And there's cultural things that we could uncover. But without going into a 5-hour podcast, she runs into the city and boldly tells her story. Come and see. And here's the difference. When we tell our story for God's glory, come and see this man who told me everything I've ever done. Could he be Messiah? When we tell our stories for God's glory, sometimes we share the hard parts, sometimes we share the triumphant parts, sometimes we share the funny parts, sometimes we share the waiting parts that are so hard. But when we tell our story for God's glory, it is not just, let me tell you about me, let me tell you what I did, let me tell you about the things, let me tell you about this. The focus is because of him. I got through that because of him. I am changed because of him. I prayed this and then waited and then this, and then this is how God worked in that moment. It's because of him, telling our stories for God's glory. And what happened? Many came to know who he was because of her. How beautiful to see this instantaneous transformation. Jesus didn't say, hey, before you go, you should probably go take a seminary class. Before you go tell your story, you need to maybe work on a few things. Before you go. No, she went and told her story. And we just see the instant transformation that can happen, not because of anything we do, but because of him. So my encouragement for you today, read John 4, the woman at the well. Read it for yourself and know that your story matters. Your story for God's glory could just be the thing that someone needs to hear to step into that relationship with Jesus, to know that the God of the Bible is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. We'll see you all later.